I always thought I had a perfect life. My name is Mike, and I've been married to Jessica for 7 years. We met in college, where her beauty and wit captivated me. We clicked instantly, shared interests, similar humor, the same vision of our future. Everything seemed to align. We bought a cozy home in the suburbs, settled into our jobs, and started dreaming about kids. Life was good, or so I thought. But over the last few months, things began to shift. It started with subtle changes in Jessica's behavior. She became more distant, more engrossed in her phone. Late nights at work turned into late nights out with friends. I could sense something was off, but I brushed it off as work stress. After all, we all go through phases. Little did I know, those phases were just the surface of something much deeper. The first real sign was when I noticed her phone usage. She'd be texting or scrolling through social media at odd hours. I remember the night I came home early from work, hoping to surprise her with dinner. Instead, I found her in the kitchen, her back to me, hastily typing away on her phone. I asked who she was texting, and she spun around, her face flush, stammering about a work project. Something felt wrong, but I chose to believe her. Trust, right. Then came the other signs, the unexplained absences, the strange perfume lingering in the air when she returned home, and the way she'd become defensive if I asked about her day. It was as if she were hiding something. I started to feel like a detective, piecing together fragments of a jigsaw that made no sense. Finally, I reached a breaking point when I stumbled upon a series of messages on her phone. It was a Friday evening. I was cleaning up after dinner when I noticed her phone buzz on the table. Out of curiosity, I picked it up, and that's when my world spun out of control. The screen lit up with a conversation between Jessica and some guy named David. My heart raced as I scrolled through their exchanges, filled with flirty emojis, inside jokes, and plans to meet up. The final nail in the coffin was a message that read, "I can't wait to see you tonight. Just think of the sex we'll have." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My hands trembled as I put the phone back down, trying to process the betrayal. I confronted her that night. As soon as she walked in, I could feel the tension in the air. I couldn't hold back. "Who is David?" I demanded, my voice barely restrained. Jessica's face paled, her eyes wide with disbelief. "What are you talking about?" she stammered, trying to play innocent, but I wasn't having it. I waved my phone in front of her, barely able to get the words out through my anger and hurt. When the truth came spilling out, it was like watching a car crash in slow motion. She didn't even try to deny it. Instead, she offered up pathetic excuses about how I had neglected her and that she felt lonely. "It was just physical," she said, as if that made it any better. I wanted to scream, to make her feel the pain she had caused me. Instead, I just listened as she weaved her web of lies, each word hitting me like a dagger. The emotional impact was overwhelming. I felt everything at once: betrayal, anger, sadness, and disbelief. I went from feeling like a husband to feeling utterly alone. My heart was shattered into pieces, and the love I once had for her felt like a distant memory. It was hard to breathe, hard to think. At that moment, I realized the life I had built was a lie, and I was simply a supporting character in a story I never wanted to be a part of. After hours of back and forth, I decided to take a step back. I needed time to process this. As I sat in the dim light of our living room, I felt like I was in a fog. I was tired of the lies, tired of her excuses. I realized that I couldn't stay in a marriage that was built on deceit. I had to make a decision. Did I want to fight for a relationship that seemed so tainted, or was it time to walk away? Thinking clearly was hard, but deep down, I knew that this was just the beginning of a much longer journey. I had to think of myself first. I had to plan my next steps carefully. Little did Jessica know, I would not only be leaving her, but I would ensure she had nothing left. That's when the idea hit me. I needed to hire the best divorce lawyer in town. After that agonizing confrontation, I spent the next few days in a haze. I couldn't concentrate on work, and every moment felt suffocating. I replayed the confrontation over and over in my mind. Each time, my anger surged anew. I thought about how Jessica had betrayed me, about how she had thrown away everything we had built together for a cheap fling with some lawyer. A lawyer. The irony wasn't lost on me. She had chosen someone who supposedly had the upper hand in manipulation, someone who made a living by twisting the truth. I was determined to take control of my life. She thought she could get away with this, but I wouldn't just sit back and watch her destroy our marriage while she waltzed off into the sunset with her new lover. I had to act fast. I couldn't let her think that she could just walk away scot-free while I was left to pick up the pieces. It was time to take charge of my own future. I did some research online, combing through reviews and testimonials until I found the best divorce attorney in the area, Natalie. She came highly recommended, with a track record of securing favorable outcomes for her clients. I dialed her number with shaky hands, feeling a mix of anxiety and determination. After a few rings, she answered in a confident, professional tone. I explained my situation, and she listened intently, asking all the right questions. With each answer I provided, I felt a sense of relief. I had someone on my side, someone who understood the gravity of my situation. We scheduled a meeting for the following week at her office. As I prepared for our first consultation, I found myself oscillating between feelings of anger and sadness. I couldn't shake off the pain Jessica had caused me, but I channeled that energy into my plans. I started documenting everything, from our financial situation to her questionable behavior over the last few months. I was going to have all my ducks in a row when it came time to discuss the divorce. When I finally stepped into Natalie's office, I was struck by her poise. She exuded confidence and professionalism. We went over the details of my marriage, my discovery of the affair, and my overall goals for the divorce. I told her I wanted full custody of our dog, Rusty, and to ensure that Jessica got as little as possible from our joint assets. As I spoke, I could feel the weight of my pain lifting. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my life. Mike, you have every right to feel the way you do, Natalie said firmly. Infidelity gives you grounds for a strong case. I'll make sure we navigate this process smoothly and effectively. Her words were like a salve to my wounded pride. I started to see a glimmer of hope, a way forward. We devised a strategy to make sure that Jessica would face the consequences of her actions, and I felt empowered for the first time since the discovery. In the days that followed, I began to prepare myself emotionally for the battle ahead. I found solace in workout sessions at the gym, pouring all my frustration and heartbreak into lifting weights and running. I was determined to reclaim my physical strength as much as my emotional strength. Each drop of sweat became a symbol of my resilience, a reminder that I was moving forward. But as the days turned into weeks, Jessica started to notice something was off. She'd ask about my late nights at the gym and question why I seemed more distant. I could see the gears turning in her mind, but I played it cool. I didn't want to tip her off. I needed to keep my plans under wraps until the moment was right. My heart raced whenever she brought it up, but I managed to deflect her questions with vague responses. I was a master at pretending everything was fine. Then came the moment I had dreaded, the day I had to break the news to her about the divorce. Natalie advised that it would be best to confront Jessica before formally filing the paperwork, so she wouldn't be blindsided by the legal process. I decided to do it on a Saturday afternoon. I knew it would be tough, but I had to remain strong. I had already been through the worst of it, and now I needed to channel that pain into something productive. The day of the confrontation arrived. I asked Jessica to meet me in the living room. As we sat across from each other, I could feel the tension crackling in the air. I took a deep breath, my heart hammering in my chest. "I've made a decision, Jessica," I started, my voice steady but laced with emotion. "I'm filing for divorce." The silence that followed was deafening. Her reaction was immediate. "What? You can't be serious," she exclaimed, her eyes wide with disbelief. I could see the panic setting in, and honestly, it felt good to see her shaken. I had spent months feeling powerless, and now I was the one in control. "I am serious," I replied, my tone unwavering. "You made your choice when you decided to have an affair. I won't be your fallback option. I'm working with a lawyer, and I intend to get what's fair." Her defense mechanisms kicked in, and she began backpedaling. "Mike, it was a mistake. I was unhappy. We can work on this, I swear. Just give me another chance," she pleaded, her voice rising in desperation. But I could see right through her excuses. It was too late for apologies. The trust was shattered. As the confrontation unfolded, I could feel the anger bubbling to the surface, but I kept it in check. "You've made your choices, Jess. You need to live with the consequences," I told her, my resolve stronger than ever. It was a liberating moment, and I knew I had crossed a threshold I could never go back from. In the days that followed, I felt a mix of emotions: anxiety about the impending divorce, but also a sense of freedom and empowerment. I was on a path to reclaim my life, and I would not let Jessica's betrayal define me. The days after I broke the news to Jessica were a whirlwind of emotions. While she was busy scrambling to regain her footing, I was focused on my strategy. I felt like I was finally taking charge of my life, which was a stark contrast to the helplessness I had felt when I first discovered her infidelity. The weight on my shoulders began to lift as I prepared for the next steps in the divorce process. Jessica tried to play the victim, flooding me with messages, tearful phone calls, and attempts to manipulate my feelings. "You don't really want this, do you?" she would say. "We can fix things, we've always loved each other." But her words felt hollow. I couldn't let her guilt-tripping work on me anymore. Every time she reached out, I reminded myself of her betrayal. Every flirty message to David was etched in my mind. I had a purpose now, and I wouldn't let her draw me back into the emotional roller coaster. During our conversations, I saw a side of her I had never encountered before: desperation. One night, she confronted me about my intentions. "Are you really going to take everything from me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I thought we were better than this. You want me to be miserable?" The irony of her statement didn't escape me. She had dug her own grave, and now she was trying to paint me as the villain in her story. I held firm, reminding her that her actions had consequences. "You made your choices, Jessica. You betrayed our marriage, and I refuse to be the one who gets hurt while you walk away without any repercussions." As the days turned into weeks, I threw myself into work and focused on preparing for the legal battle ahead. I met with Natalie regularly, discussing every detail of our finances and strategizing my approach. Together, we meticulously crafted a plan that would ensure I came out of this divorce with my dignity intact and as little financial loss as possible. One afternoon, as I was leafing through our financial records at Natalie's office, I had a realization. I had always trusted Jessica to manage our finances, but I had never fully understood how much she controlled. It was eye-opening to see just how entangled our finances were. While I had always considered us financially stable, I realized that Jessica had been hiding expenses and overspending on personal luxuries. I felt a surge of anger. Her affair wasn't just emotional betrayal, it had financial implications too. Armed with this new information, I decided to confront Jessica once more. This time, I wouldn't just tell her I was leaving, I would show her the evidence of her recklessness. When I brought up the finances during dinner one evening, her demeanor shifted. She became defensive and evasive. "I don't have to justify my spending to you," she snapped. Her tone was cold and accusatory, and I could see the walls she had built around herself. "Jessica, this isn't just about your spending habits, it's about trust. You've proven you can't be trusted with even the simplest things like our finances. How can I trust you with anything else?" But she continued to deflect. "You always focus on the negative, Mike. I've put up with your long hours and neglect. I deserve to treat myself." This was the moment I had been waiting for. "You deserve to treat yourself. You mean while you were treating our marriage like a joke?" I replied, my voice steady but firm. "This isn't just about you anymore, Jessica. This affects both of us." As I laid out my case, I could feel the tension between us building. Jessica's mask began to crack. Her anger boiled over and she lashed out, accusing me of being controlling and unsupportive. But deep down, I could see the fear in her eyes. She realized she was losing control and she didn't know how to cope. The confrontation left both of us shaken. I hadn't intended to escalate things, but I felt a sense of relief after laying everything bare. While Jessica continued to insist that she was the victim, I took note of her reaction. Her defensiveness only solidified my decision to move forward with the divorce. The following week, I received a call from Natalie. "I have some news that may be of interest," she said, her tone professional but with an undertone of excitement. We've obtained records of Jessica's spending during your marriage, and it doesn't look good for her. I could feel the adrenaline pumping through my veins. This was a turning point. I had the evidence I needed to push my case further. With Natalie's guidance, I began to gather all the necessary documentation. We compiled evidence of Jessica's extravagant purchases and her lack of financial accountability. It was clear that she had been leading a double life, one that involved her affair and her reckless spending habits. I felt a surge of confidence as I realized I was finally taking control of my narrative. When the divorce papers were formally filed, it felt surreal. I had gone from being a shattered husband to a man ready to fight for his future. I imagined the look on Jessica's face when she found out. I couldn't wait for the day we would sit across from each other. That courtroom. I was ready for her to see the consequences of her actions laid out before her. As I prepared for the upcoming proceedings, I felt a strange mix of emotions, righteous anger, but also a hint of sadness for what we had lost. I couldn't help but wonder how we had gone from being the couple who shared dreams to this bitter conflict. But one thing was clear. I was no longer the man who would let himself be pushed around. I was determined to move forward, stronger than ever. The day of the court hearing finally arrived, and I felt a mix of dread and determination. I woke up early, unable to shake the nervous energy coursing through me. I wasn't just battling for my financial stability. I was fighting for my dignity and for the man I had become in the wake of Jessica's betrayal. I suited up, making sure I looked sharp and confident. I knew I had to present myself as someone who had taken charge of his life, not just a victim of a broken marriage. As I entered the courthouse, the atmosphere felt heavy. I could see families in various states of distress and anger, and I realized that I was part of a larger world of pain and betrayal. I took a deep breath, straightened my tie, and reminded myself why I was there. This wasn't just about money. It was about standing up for myself and ensuring Jessica faced the repercussions of her actions. Natalie met me at the entrance with a reassuring smile. "You ready for this?" she asked, her professionalism shining through. I nodded, though my stomach churned with anxiety. "Just remember, emotions can run high in these situations. Keep your cool and focus on the facts," she advised, and I appreciated her calm demeanor. Together, we made our way to the courtroom. As we entered the room, I spotted Jessica sitting at the plaintiff's table, her expression a mix of defiance and fear. She was clutching her attorney's arm, but I could see the slightest tremor in her hands. I felt a moment of satisfaction seeing her on edge. She had put me through hell, and now it was time for her to feel the weight of her choices. The judge entered, and the proceedings began. I sat through the opening statements, listening as both attorneys laid out their cases. Jessica's lawyer painted a picture of a loving wife who had been wronged, emphasizing how my long hours had left her feeling neglected. She spoke about how my career had taken precedence over our marriage, but I saw right through the facade. I knew she was attempting to manipulate the narrative to her advantage. When it was time for Natalie to present our evidence, I watched with bated breath. She laid out the financial records we had gathered, carefully explaining the discrepancies in Jessica's spending. "Your Honor, the evidence clearly shows that the defendant has been hiding assets and overspending on personal luxuries while neglecting their shared financial responsibilities," she stated firmly. I could feel my heart racing as I caught Jessica's reaction, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Then came the moment I had been both anticipating and dreading, when I would have to take the stand. As I stood up, I felt a wave of vulnerability wash over me. I was about to expose my innermost feelings and struggles to a room full of strangers, but I reminded myself that I was no longer the meek husband I once was. I was a man reclaiming his power. My voice steadied as I spoke about the emotional turmoil I had experienced since discovering Jessica's affair. The judge listened attentively as I recounted the late nights of worry, the feelings of betrayal that had consumed me, and the lengths I had gone to confront her about her infidelity. I saw Jessica react in real time. Her facade of confidence began to crack as she realized the impact of her actions was being laid bare before the court. Your Honor, I never imagined I would be standing here today, but I refuse to let this woman walk away without facing the consequences of her choices. I stated, my voice firm. I invested everything into our marriage, only to have it thrown away for a moment of weakness. As the words poured out, I felt a surge of empowerment. I was no longer a passive participant in this drama. I was a key player, taking charge of my own narrative. When I stepped down, I felt a mix of exhaustion and relief. I had said what needed to be said, and now it was up to the judge to decide. Jessica's attorney had a chance to cross-examine me, and I braced for the onslaught of questions. I was prepared for her to try to paint me as the villain, but I had steeled myself for whatever she might throw my way. Mr. Anderson, isn't it true that you spent long hours at work, often neglecting your marital duties? She asked, trying to redirect the focus back on me. I took a deep breath, ready to respond. It's true that I worked long hours, but I did so to provide for our family. I believed we were working together towards a common goal, I replied, feeling the truth of my words resonate with the room. But that doesn't excuse betrayal. I made sacrifices for this marriage, and Jessica chose to disregard our vows. It's her actions that led us here today. The tension in the courtroom hung thick in the air. I could see Jessica's face redden as she realized her attempts to turn the narrative against me were failing. I felt a rush of vindication. I was no longer the only one suffering in this situation. I realized that I was finally standing up for myself, and it felt liberating. After several hours of testimony and cross-examination, we finally concluded for the day. As we stepped out of the courtroom, I could sense the weight of the battle still looming over us. Natalie reassured me. You did great today, Mike. The judge saw the facts, and I believe we have a strong case. Her words filled me with hope, but I also knew this wasn't over yet. That evening, I returned home feeling drained yet strangely empowered. I realized that this experience had transformed me in profound ways. I had gone from being a husband betrayed to a man determined to reclaim his life. As I sank into the couch, I reflected on everything that had led me here. I was no longer in the shadows. I was stepping into the light of my own truth. As I began drafting a post on my experiences for an online community, I thought about others who might find themselves in similar situations. The lessons I had learned throughout this journey were invaluable. Trust your instincts, seek support, and never allow anyone to make you feel less than you deserve. I paused, realizing how far I had come. The road ahead might still be rocky, but I was ready to face whatever came next. I had learned that I could survive this. I could thrive. The following weeks felt like a blur of emotions. The divorce proceedings dragged on, with court dates scheduled and rescheduled, each one filled with its own tension and drama. There were moments when I felt strong and empowered, and then moments when doubt crept in, leaving me wondering if I was truly making the right choices. But I kept reminding myself of Jessica's betrayal, of the way she had damaged what we once had. That kept fueling my fire. Natalie and I continued to meet regularly to prepare for the next hearings. We reviewed evidence, strategized for cross-examinations, and even practiced possible scenarios that might unfold in court. I was a man on a mission, determined to ensure that Jessica faced the consequences of her actions. Every time I sat down with Natalie, I felt increasingly confident in my resolve. One day, Natalie called me with urgent news. Mike, I just received word that Jessica wants to settle outside of court. She informed me. She's concerned about how things are progressing and wants to discuss a potential agreement. I felt a mix of surprise and skepticism. What exactly does she want? I asked, my heart racing. Natalie explained that Jessica's lawyer had reached out, suggesting they wanted to negotiate the terms of the divorce, particularly regarding finances and asset division. It seems she realizes the evidence we have against her isn't favorable, Natalie said. This could be an opportunity for you to secure a good deal. I mulled over the idea. After everything, part of me wanted to fight to the bitter end, while another part thought it might be wiser to cut my losses and move on. We arranged a meeting for the following week, and I prepared myself mentally for the negotiation. I practiced what I wanted to say, focusing on the importance of ensuring that Jessica faced the reality of her actions. I wanted to make it clear that her infidelity had consequences, and I would not let her walk away with anything she didn't deserve. When the day finally came, I walked into the conference room feeling a mix of anxiety and readiness. Jessica was already seated, looking tense and defensive. Her lawyer, a slick-looking man in a tailored suit, smiled at me condescendingly as we exchanged pleasantries. I could sense Jessica's unease. She was trying to project confidence, but I could see the cracks starting to show. As the discussions began, Jessica's attorney laid out a proposed settlement. They were offering to divide our assets more favorably for her, citing her emotional distress and how this divorce had impacted her life. I felt a surge of anger. Emotional distress? I echoed incredulously. What about my emotional distress after you chose to cheat on me? This is not a negotiation for sympathy, it's about accountability. Natalie jumped in, reminding the attorney of the evidence we had collected, including Jessica's spending habits and the timeline of her affair. The tension in the room thickened as I saw Jessica's face turn pale. I could feel the power shifting in my favor. If she truly wants to settle, then she needs to be prepared to accept the reality of her actions, I asserted. We went back and forth for what felt like hours. I laid out my terms, insisting that she would not receive more than her fair share of our joint assets. I was determined to ensure that Jessica understood there were consequences for her choices. I could see her frustration mounting, and for the first time I felt a glimmer of satisfaction. She was no longer the one in control. Finally, after several rounds of negotiations, we reached an agreement. Jessica would receive a smaller portion of our shared assets than she had initially proposed, and I would retain custody of Rusty, our beloved dog. As we shook hands to finalize the deal, I felt a mix of relief and vindication. I had stood my ground and refused to be bullied into submission. After the meeting, I stepped outside, inhaling deeply the crisp air of the late afternoon. I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The negotiations had been tough, but I had proven to myself that I could stand up for what I believed in. I was no longer the man who allowed himself to be walked all over. I was a survivor. In the following weeks, I began to rebuild my life. I focused on my work, poured myself into my relationships with friends and family, and started to rediscover who I was outside of my marriage. I took trips to places I had always wanted to visit, indulged in new hobbies, and even met some new friends who shared my interests. Slowly but surely, I was reclaiming my happiness. Yet, as I moved forward, there were still moments when memories of Jessica would creep into my mind. I found myself wondering if she was truly remorseful or if she was simply playing the role of the victim to secure sympathy. I had no answers, and maybe I didn't need them. I had learned that her actions were a reflection of her character, not mine. One night, as I sat on my porch with Rusty beside me, I reflected on everything I had been through. The pain of betrayal had transformed me, but it had also taught me valuable lessons about resilience, self-worth, and the importance of standing up for myself. I realized that sometimes, the hardest battles lead to the most significant transformations. As I sat there watching the sun set, I felt hopeful about the future. I knew that love was possible again, but I also understood the importance of taking my time and allowing myself to heal fully. I had faced my demons, and while the scars of my marriage would remain, I wasn't defined by them. Instead, I was a man ready to embrace what lay ahead. As the weeks turned into months following the settlement, I found myself in a much different place than where I had started. The pain from my marriage's collapse had not vanished overnight, but I had learned to carry it, to incorporate it into who I was becoming. I took pride in knowing that I had emerged from the storm stronger and more self-aware. I spent more time with friends, enjoying the simple pleasures of life. Weekend barbecues, hiking trips, and even karaoke nights began to punctuate my existence again. I began to laugh openly, something I hadn't fully done during the tumultuous final months of my marriage. I was rediscovering the joys of life outside of the shadows of betrayal. My relationship with Rusty flourished too. He provided not just companionship, but a sense of routine and responsibility. Every morning, we would go for long walks, and I found peace in those moments. It was a reminder that even after the darkest storms, there could be light. He became my emotional anchor, a furry reminder that loyalty and love still existed in the world. Then came the day when I decided to reconnect with the dating scene. It was daunting, but my friends encouraged me to put myself out there to open my heart again. I signed up for a dating app, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. I didn't want to rush into anything, but I was open to the possibility of finding love again, genuine, untainted love. One evening, I matched with a woman named Sarah. She had a kind smile and a witty sense of humor that drew me in. We began chatting, and our conversations flowed easily, filled with laughter and shared interests. After a few weeks of back and forth, we decided to meet for coffee. I was nervous going into it, but as we talked, I felt a genuine connection forming. It was refreshing to be with someone who seemed real, someone who shared my values and goals. As our relationship developed, I slowly began to lower the walls I had built around my heart. Sarah understood my past and was patient with my hesitations. She didn't push for anything I wasn't ready for, which felt like a breath of fresh air. With each date, I felt myself healing a little more, learning to trust again and appreciate the beauty of companionship. During one of our weekend hikes, we reached a scenic overlook. As we sat together, watching the sunset paint the sky with brilliant colors, I felt a sense of completeness and solace. I shared my story with her, how I had navigated the painful waters of betrayal and emerged on the other side. She listened intently, her eyes filled with compassion. It felt good to share my truth with someone who wasn't judging me but instead appreciated my journey. Over time, I realized that my experience with Jessica had shaped me, but it didn't have to define me. I was learning how to love again, in a way that was healthier and more authentic. Sarah was kind, understanding, and supportive, and I found myself smiling more than I had in years. As I continued to build my new life, I took stock of the lessons learned from my marriage and the divorce. I understood the importance of open communication and honesty in relationships. I had learned not to ignore my instincts and to prioritize my happiness and well-being. I was no longer afraid to stand up for what I deserved. Eventually, I decided to reach out to Jessica one last time. It wasn't for closure. It was more about tying up loose ends in my own mind. I sent her a brief email, simply stating that I hoped she was doing well and that I had moved on with my life. I didn't expect a reply, nor did I want one. I felt a surge of liberation just writing it. It was my way of saying goodbye to the pain of that chapter in my life. As I sat in my living room one evening, sipping a glass of wine and watching the sunset, I reflected on how far I had come. I had endured heartbreak, betrayal, and the emotional roller coaster of divorce, but I had emerged stronger and wiser. I had learned to embrace life and cherish the connections I was forging anew. I realized that love, though complicated and fragile, is also one of the most powerful forces in our lives. It can heal us, teach us, and help us grow in ways we never thought possible. My experience with Jessica had taught me the importance of self-love and respect. I knew that if I could survive that storm, I could handle anything life threw my way. Looking ahead, I felt hopeful. I was excited about the future and ready to embrace it fully. I was no longer the man defined by betrayal. I was a man moving forward with lessons learned and a heart open to new possibilities. As I settled in for the evening, I smiled to myself. I had survived the worst, and now I was ready to thrive. Life was good, and it was just beginning.